God Family Country, how's everybody doing? We're going to switch gears tonight. Now, this has been in the news, and I think regardless of your religious affiliation, whichever party you lean towards, this is a little sus. They keep saying they're going to release these Epstein files. And recent developments regarding the release of the Epstein files have raised public suspicion due to the perceived delays and lack of transparency. If you got nothing to hide, why hide the paperwork when there's nothing to hide? And we're being all about full transparency. So, on February 27, 2025, Attorney General Pamela Bondi, in collaboration with the FBI, released the first phase of declassified Epstein files. A lot of people were disappointed because it seems like it was just a little bit more fluff. Some people were claiming that some of this information was already released, and much of the information had been previously leaked or already made public. So it was offering not really a lot of insight. And the lack of new revelations, of course, they led to widespread disappointment. And if that was everything that was put out, I think we would be okay with it. Like, hey, I guess you guys kind of gave us the bulk of everything, and there's nothing more to see here. There was a response from Bondi, and she acknowledged that thousands of pages related to Epstein's investigation had not been disclosed by the FBI's New York field office. So we're kind of doing the hot potato blame game at this point, and she demanded the release of those documents. And here we are. We're still waiting. A lot of people have talked about Epstein's Island, Epstein's Island, Epstein's Island, but what nobody talks about is Jeffrey Epstein's Zorro Ranch. One thing about Jeffrey Epstein's Zorro Ranch, it's a property situated in Stanley, New Mexico, which is a very small town with what they refer to is the population is the size of a high school classroom. Maybe pun intended. A lot of people have talked about Epstein's Island, Epstein's Island, Epstein's Island, but what nobody talks about is Jeffrey Epstein's Zorro Ranch. One thing about Jeffrey Epstein's Zorro Ranch, it's a property situated in Stanley, New Mexico, which is a very small town with what they refer to is the population is the size of a high school classroom. Maybe pun intended, because Jeffrey Epstein was into underage children. It's a city about 40 miles southeast of Santa Fe, New Mexico. When you get there, there's nowhere you could really go. You're about 40 miles out in the desert, and you're not going to be able to get to anybody else. The ranch has 7,500 acres. That's 11.7 square miles of high desert terrain. And there's in the property, there's a 33,339 square foot mansion constructed in 1993, featuring a 3-story, 4-bedroom main house with a 2,100 square foot living room. Additionally, structures included a caretaker's residence, stables, a firehouse, a yurt. The ranch also boasts a private grass airstrip and a hangar, facilitating discreet arrivals and departures. The ranch's proximity to Santa Fe and Albuquerque is approximately 40 miles, and it provides easy access to urban centers. I wanted to show you guys this Zorro Ranch and how creepy it is, and how we haven't really heard a lot about Zorro Ranch, how it came about, how Jeffrey Epstein purchased it, and the horrible things that happened on the ranch. Now, first of all, as you can see, this is in Santa Fe, New Mexico. It's off the market. How horrible to have sold this house. You can see that there's no civilization around at all. No civilization around. Obviously, tons of money poured into this area. This was the place where some children's nightmares were lived out, and some sick fetishes took place, some sick crimes. Here's the house that was built. Looks like they didn't spare any expense. It looks like to me that they had, here's a good picture right here. Looks like here you came here, you were able to kind of have your home away from home, and this just fits Jeffrey Epstein's island, and here's Jeffrey Epstein's island in the desert, if you will. You can see right here there's no way to get away from anybody. So the mysteries, suspicions, and powerful people surrounding one of Epstein's least discussed properties, which is Zorro's Ranch. Now, Zorro's Ranch is located in Stanley, New Mexico, an extremely small and isolated town, perfect for perverts, right? I mean, the population history in 1990, there was 31 residents. Not too many doors to knock on if you ran and escaped and were looking for help. Matter of fact, we'll get into that later, showing you the low population and how far away it was from somebody else's house. So in 2000, there was 52 residents. And also in 2013, only in 2020, there was 108 residents. So this town has stayed relatively small for a very long time. And that's why it really doesn't make much sense to have such a huge, I mean, look at this sprawling, I mean, I get it. Some people want to be away from everybody else, but Jeffrey Epstein's reason for being away from everybody else is a lot different than a normal human being. As you can see, the house has everything, including these gorgeous sunsets, just plains, fields. It's a high desert. There's also nobody around. No one's here to hear the cries that go on at Zorro Ranch. Nobody's here to become suspicious. That's the nearest city, major city, is 38 miles away. Santa Fe is 50 miles away. So Epstein was always in these elite social circles. So why would he buy a massive property in a place barely on the map? Unless you needed complete privacy and secrecy. And also, how did he know about this area? What was his whole mission? The island, secrecy. Here, secrecy. I didn't hear about Zorro Ranch like I did Epstein Island. I'm not sure why they didn't speak about it as much. Let me show you guys on the map here. Look right here on the map. Closest to the main road, it's 17 miles. When you start investigating this and pulling down the layers, there's not, I think this is his right here. This is part of what they had going on here. And here's the ranch. It's absolutely in the middle of nowhere. I believe this is a very mountainous region right here. Let's see if we could get some terrain. I mean, trying to get away from Epstein's would be super treacherous. I was looking the other day at where the closest house was, and I think it is right here, 6.2 miles away. You wouldn't even know it was there if you were on the road, because it looks like it's a half a mile away. You might not even see that if you were on the road and traveling. Really, really treacherous conditions. And even from the road, you can't really see the ranch. Is that double gate for security? Barbed wire. It's like a grate of some sort, but anyways, let's get back to this creepy place called Zorro Ranch. The purchase. How did Epstein come across Zorro Ranch? Who helped Epstein get this ranch? It was bought in 1993 from the family of former New Mexico Governor Bruce King. Now we know that Epstein floated in circles of the upper classes, influential people, world's most powerful, world's most famous, world's most rich, and obviously hung out with them, and they knew who he was. I don't know if they knew who he was, but they knew of him. Knowing Epstein in these circles was a regular thing, to see him with the stars. I could see maybe he found out through somebody else that somebody was selling this land, and in 1993 he bought this land from the New Mexico governor Bruce King, and Bruce King served 3 separate terms as New Mexico governor. So Epstein built a 26,700 square foot mansion with a 2,100 square foot living room on the land. So just to kind of give you a breakdown of 2,100 square feet, that's some people's whole house. That was his living room. And the 26,700 square foot mansion, well, some people's parcels, large parcels, 10,000 square feet. So he had a house that was 3 times a large parcel, and that was just the house. Again, this was on over 7,000 acres. So in addition to that, Epstein wasn't a rancher. So the question is, who tipped him off about this massive property in a political family's hand? It could be, we could pull out all the conspiracies, but we could also see that in networking, someone's going to hear about something from time to time. But it definitely fits. If he was putting the word out that he was looking for some land where he could purchase that was off grid, this was definitely the place. Let's go to the private airstrip. Who was flying in and out? Epstein built a private airstrip in an airplane hangar on the property. Now, flight logs back then, I could see him easily being able to build a private airstrip and an airplane hangar on the property. This would allow him and his guests to fly in and out discreetly without having to go to any major hubs, which is really one of the reasons why Epstein Island is in the spotlight right now. They're able to gather those logs in an area of 23 people. Flight logs could get lost in translation, be not as important in an area where it is discreet, avoiding major airports and customs. This allowed Epstein to fly under the radar. This is the worst type of person you want flying under the radar, doing under the radar activities with his friends, his associates that are committing these horrible acts that we're still waiting for the release of the Epstein list to see who these people are. I mean, the way that they do damage control on the Epstein list is evidence enough that there must be something so bad that it will blow the top, and they are afraid of it infecting the top infrastructure. So, the private airstrip, who's flying in and out, we will never be able to know. What we know about his flights to Little St. James. So the question is, why do we have almost no public flight logs for Zorro Ranch? And I think that's exactly why Zorro Ranch was picked for Zorro Ranch, was less information, under the radar, more incognito. I wouldn't be surprised if some of the most horrific things happened here, where you're not going to get, just like the island, you're not getting away, you're not going anywhere. And it's treacherous terrain, especially in the summer. In the winter, flash floods, unbearable heat. You couldn't run away if you wanted to. And if you would, where would you go? It just looks like there's nothing there for miles and miles and miles. Here's the next thing that they found at Zorro Ranch: the high security surveillance and tech setup. So there were reports that suggest hidden cameras were everywhere inside the mansion. If that doesn't tell you right then and there was the same thing that was going on Lolita's Island was going on here, or maybe even more. Just evidence is right there. Case closed. There were hidden cameras inside the mansion for Jeffrey Epstein to do his work. There was a large mechanical room that housed massive servers and computer systems. Who knows what those are for? The servers and computer systems, meaning that these cameras and everything were online? That's the first we would think of. Or what was he doing? Who was he communicating with? And what was going on out in Zorro Ranch? Some people believe that this was used for recording blackmail material. Epstein had a known pattern of recording powerful figures. So, was Zorro Ranch another operation for leverage? Well, I'm going to get into something even more disturbing as we kind of move on. So, we're looking at this house. You can obviously see this was a house built to entertain and impress. And it looks like it was set to create comfort for these people in the middle of nowhere. And why would these people what would make somebody go to this place with Jeffrey Epstein in the middle of nowhere? One could say, hey, they just wanted to get away and relax. But, you know, if Epstein Island tells you anything about what Zorro Ranch would be, I would say it's just as diabolical, just as horrible, if not more. So we're looking at look, where are you gonna go? If you were there, you were trying to get away, it looks like you're not gonna make it anywhere. What they should have did was bulldoze this to the ground, but what they did was sell it. The money went to the victims. Man, we could have raised $27 million and burnt this thing to the ground. All the money we're giving other countries for other things, we could have just burnt and torched this thing to the ground. I don't even know why somebody would want to live in this, but hey, here's a working horse stable. Look, maybe living quarters to keep people away. Amenities for the pedophiles. Yeah, here's the horse stable. This looks like maybe like a cabin that's there. Here they have their own fire station, greenhouse. Again, probably maybe for the help, or people stay. Maybe they don't stay in the main. I'm not really sure what building that is. General store. Look at this terrain. You know, when we're looking on that map, where are you gonna go if you could get away, if you could slip away for a second and you wanted to get away? You're coming here, landing, maybe you didn't even drive there, you're just landing here and being shuttled, you're being trafficked here. Where are you? You have no idea where you're at. You don't even know what country you're in. There was something else that was rather quite disturbing about Epstein's life, was his eugenics and seeding plans. The worst person to continue their offspring had a diabolical plan to want to be the Genghis Khan of pedophiles, and he suggested he wanted to seed the human race with his DNA. Well, I'd rather we weed the human race of his DNA. He planned to impregnate multiple women at Zorro Ranch as a part of a bizarre eugenics experiment. I just think he sounds like a big pervert and is doing a bunch of perverted stuff, sick and twisted. And I'm sure he had some sort of scientific, justifiable, psychotic reason for this. I don't really read further into what he wanted to do besides just being a sicko. You know, he frequently met with elite scientists from Harvard and MIT. What a lot of people are saying is maybe this was part of a larger transhumanist agenda or it's just an excuse for something darker. So we're not really sure. Based upon, I do think it started with him just being a sicko, but sickos with money, power, and technology can do some crazy things. I'm not really sure what his diabolical plan was at Zorro Ranch besides impregnating a bunch of women. Here's the next part. New Mexico. Let's go back to this ranch. This picture is from Google, September 2024. So whoever moved in here, they have these signs up because there's people probably trying to visit this ranch or figure out about this ranch. Maybe this ranch has some, with 7,000 acres, there's definitely a possibility of some bodies being buried out here on this acreage. Maybe somebody didn't play well with Jeffrey's plans and became a liability and is out here laying in a shallow grave, a deep grave, something. Like I said, there's a lot of land here. I wonder if we could use some sort of LiDAR or some sort of sonar to go over this land and with a fine-tooth comb and see whose bodies are there, or if there are any bodies. I wonder if we could go over this land with a fine-tooth comb or some of the latest technology and find out if there are indeed some missing persons here. Because there's no way that over those years everybody decided to play ball, everybody decided to play well, and there wasn't an instance where something went wrong, got out of hand, created a great threat for Jeffrey Epstein, especially with him being able to keep things under wraps, and maybe was disposing of women, and maybe was disposing of them to the point where he had to start letting some. I don't know, but it's not that far-fetched, especially that you're in the middle of the desert in a town of 23 people and you're a pedo and you're doing weird creepy pedo stuff with your pedo friends and you got a private plane. This seems very premeditated. The Zorro's Ranch seems a pedophile's resort, and it wasn't, Jeffrey Epstein wasn't just trying to catch people, he was also a pedophile himself. So it wasn't like he was like, I'm just trying to, not that it would make it better, but he wasn't just trying to catch people in compromising situations. He himself was in compromising situations as well, which probably made the weirdos he attracted, probably made them more comfortable around him, right? And I'm pretty sure that he finessed some people to some bad situations as well, where, oh, you didn't know that won't, hey, now, well, your secret's safe with me. I won't say anything, but I may need a favor sometime in the future. And who knows, the reason the crazy thing about this is that nobody knows how Jeffrey Epstein came to be rich, how he got his money, what exactly he did, because he wasn't really that significant of a person, but he carried all this money and this power and this influence. And here's my take on it. In computers, in coding, and in tech, and in marketing, one thing that we know is of most value, that's worth the most, is information. Jeffrey Epstein, in his world, was probably no different. The information he had was extremely valuable and created extreme power. In addition to money, because money can be printed from power. Jeffrey was able to harness this power with the information, just like in tech. Sometimes they'll have you get an app and you'll download it on your phone and you'll be like, cool, I'm playing this game for free. But no, you're not. You're not playing this game for free. You're giving up valuable information on the app. You didn't even know what you accepted. The app said it could track you. The app knows when you go to the store, when you're at home, how much time you spend doing this, how much time you spend on the phone. Maybe it knows what videos you're watching. Maybe it can listen to your voice like Siri, or Alexa, and before you know it, you've given up more than you ever would want to. And now maybe you just by yourself aren't that valuable, but when we put all those numbers together and everybody who decides to play that game or utilize that app, we now have algorithms and information. And I think Zorro's Ranch was about that as well. You see the massive servers there and the cameras in every room. He was gathering information. But who was he gathering information on, and why won't they release that information? Thank you for listening to part 1 of Jeffrey Epstein's Zorro Ranch Horrors. Part 2 will be out tomorrow, followed by possibly a part 3, depending on how we edit it. We also will do a recap covering key details and overlooked aspects of Epstein's secretive Zorro Ranch. Stay tuned. This picture is from Google, September 2024. So obviously they have these signs up because there's people probably trying to visit this ranch. Maybe this ranch has, with 7,000 acres, there's definitely a possibility of some bodies being buried out here on this acreage. Maybe somebody didn't play well with Jeffrey's plans and became a liability and is out here laying in a shallow grave, a deep grave. Like I said, there's a lot of land here. I wonder if we could use some sort of LiDAR to go over this land and with a fine-tooth comb and see whose bodies are there, or if there are any bodies. I wonder if we could go over this land with a fine-tooth comb or some of the latest technology and find out if there are indeed some missing persons here. Because there's no way that over those years everybody decided to play ball, everybody decided to play well, and there wasn't an instance where something went wrong, got out of hand, created a great threat for Jeffrey Epstein, especially with him being able to keep things under wraps, and maybe was disposing of women, and maybe was disposing of them to the point where he had to start letting some. I don't know, but it's not that far-fetched, especially when you got this creepy. You're in the middle of the desert, in a town of 23 people, and you're a pedo. And you're doing weird, creepy pedo stuff with your pedo friends, and you got a private plane. This seems very premeditated. The Zorro's Ranch seems a pedophile's, resort. And it wasn't. Jeffrey Epstein wasn't just trying to catch people. He was also a pedophile himself. He wasn't just trying to catch people in compromising situations. He himself was in compromising situations as well, which probably made the weirdos he attracted, probably made them more comfortable around him, right? And I'm pretty sure that he finessed some people into some bad situations as well, where, oh, you didn't know that won't. Hey, now, well, your secret's safe with me. I won't say anything, but I may need a favor sometime in the future. And who knows? The reason the crazy thing about this is that nobody knows how Jeffrey Epstein came to be rich, how he got his money, what exactly he did, because he wasn't really that significant of a person, but he carried all this money and this power and this influence. And here's my take on it. In coding and in tech and in marketing, one thing that we know is of most value, that's worth the most, is information. Jeffrey Epstein, in his world, was probably no different. The information he had was extremely valuable and created extreme power. In addition to money, because money can be printed from power. So Jeffrey was able to harness this power with the information. Just like in tech, sometimes they'll have you get an app and you'll download it on your phone and you'll be like, cool, I'm playing this game for free. But no, you're not. You're not playing this game for free. You're giving up valuable information on the app. You didn't even know what you accepted. The app said it could track you. The app knows when you go to the store, when you're at home, how much time you spend doing this, how much time you spend on the phone. Maybe it knows what videos you're watching. Maybe it can listen to your voice like Siri or Alexa. And before you know it, you've given up more than you ever would want to. And now maybe you just by yourself aren't that valuable, but when we put all those numbers together and everybody who decides to play that game or utilize that app, we now have algorithms and information. And I think Zorro's Ranch was about that as well. You see the massive servers there and the cameras in every room. He was gathering information. But who was he gathering information on, and why won't they release that information just based on the fact of just, forget the public's outcry and curiosity, just based on the victims, the perpetrators should be brought to justice, but they're not being brought to justice. You've only seen one leak over there on one of the royal family members had to step down because the evidence was irrefutable, and that was just one. And so when you think about how they handled that, they were able to kind of distance themselves and strip him of his duties and move on, business as usual. Who else is, if that list were to just drop and the FBI did their due diligence and they have videotapes and all the servers and everything like that, and they've talked to Jeffrey and they've talked to his girlfriend, I forget what her name was. What is the threat to the infrastructure? Do they think that this would threaten society? Or are these people just so powerful and so embedded? Is it so horrible? Is it so infested, our societal infrastructure, that it would just shock so many people? Because honestly, again, if there's nothing to hide, there's nothing to hide. There's no reason to even have this conversation. You should have just released the files and made sure that the victims weren't listed in there. Release the Epstein files, make sure the victims are taken off, sign it, c'est la vie. Such is life. Let the dice roll. And if there are some people on there like, hey, this person really didn't know, cool, just make excerpts about them. They're still in public light. I don't think it really matters. I think if you were around them, you had, smut on your name, you got dirt on your shoulder, you were tainted. I think it's kind of hard to pivot yourself away from him, especially the more you hung out with him. People like, you didn't know, you really didn't know. New Mexico is known for its history of secrecy. So it seemed like a good spot for Jeffrey Epstein to act out his diabolical plans. It seems like this was his perfect spot apart from Epstein's Island. And the fact that it's more hidden, more secluded, more in the middle of nowhere, and more about, Epstein's Island was luxurious right next to Florida. It was right there by the mainland. The fact that this was more secluded, more secret, had its private landing strip, just makes me feel like maybe this was where most of his most diabolical things happen. Now, speaking of New Mexico's history of secrecy, New Mexico is home to Los Alamos Labs, where the atomic bomb was developed, Area 51 connections, Roswell, secret government projects, ultra private elite ranches. So bingo, that might be one of the reasons why he knew about this, was these ultra private elite ranches. Now, I don't know when they started. if they started before, they just started in the 90s. So this may have been a buzz in these social circles, these high-class social circles. So he may have found out like somebody else normally would. Epstein had connections to powerful scientists, possibly making New Mexico a perfect location for secret projects. Remember, I told you he was thinking about spreading his DNA to be the pedophile's Genghis Khan. You know, just spreading his seed, making sure that he, lives on. The suspicion is, did Epstein specifically choose New Mexico because of its history of secrecy? When you look at this area, you just pan out. When you pan out, Albuquerque, 54 miles. All these little towns right here. I see places here now, hotels along the interstate. How much of this was going on in the 90s or the early 2000s? It seems like this area has had a recent growth explosion like everywhere else in America as people start to spread out, especially lately. In 2013, it had 30 people and now it has like 100, so it like doubled. But if you look here, I mean, there's mountains. This is desolate and in the middle of nowhere. I mean, look at this town. Jeffrey Epstein decided that it was better to have his own private airport. And I'm gonna assume the worst. Who else has big ranches in New Mexico? Well, Ted Turner owns 550,000 acres in New Mexico. John Malone, he's a media mogul. Ted Turner's a CNN founder. If anybody watches CNN, I don't really watch them. Horton family, DR Horton Real Estate, owns 500,000 acres. A tech CEO, Henry Singleton, owns 1 million acres. And I actually know somebody through my ortho family retired and was going to retire in Mexico, but they were concerned about there was kind of a violence in the area where they were going to settle down, and they just felt more comfortable. Instead of getting a ranch out there, went and got a ranch in New Mexico. Now, I have no idea where it's at. I just know it's in New Mexico and they love it. It's on a ton of land. So this is not uncommon for people to go out here still and go purchase some land in New Mexico. Were any of these billionaires aware or connected of Epstein's activities in New Mexico? You know, Bill Gates has 1 acre with no ties to Zorro Ranch. But he's been in the news because he had met with Jeffrey Epstein a couple of times. And so, like I said, it doesn't really matter. People are already assuming the worst at this point. And it seems like Jeffrey Epstein would set up these honeypots to catch people. And what you might have been witnessing with a Bill Gates or this person or that person is the slow seduction of getting somebody into a compromised position, or maybe finding like-minded people that think sick like Jeffrey Epstein. Let's get into the next section. State land deals and government involvement. Epstein's company, Cypress Incorporated, leased 1,243 acres of state land next to his ranch. So here's the Commissioner, New Mexico Land Office. Cypress lease cancellation. The late Jeffrey Epstein, enlisted owner of Zorro Ranch in Santa Fe. The owner of Zorro Ranch, the late Jeffrey Epstein, enlisted as the owner of Zorro Ranch in Santa Fe County. Jeffrey Epstein's company, Cypress, had a lease for 1,243 acres of state trust land leased to Cypress. And this lease dates back to 1993 when Jeffrey Epstein originally purchased the 10,000 acre New Mexico ranch. Commissioner Garcia Richard directed staff to draft a notice of cancellation after multiple messages were left requesting access to the ranch to inspect state trust and following Epstein's death. So you can find this online. It looks like part of his land. It just seems weird. Why wouldn't Jeffrey Epstein just be okay with his 7,000 acres that he already had? Did he need some right-of-way rights? In real estate, sometimes you need to be able to get onto your land, but I don't see you needing 1,243 acres to do so. I don't know which area was. So part of this area, part of this ranch is government property. And we're not sure why he needed the 1,243, but I'm pretty sure it was just to be more secluded, more creepy, and able to do what he needs to do without anybody catching him. So, suspicion. How did Jeffrey Epstein get approved for these leases in the first place? Did political favors keep his land dealings hidden? Well, I mean, you know, the governor sold him this land. I'm pretty sure that helped him. That helped him. We want to look at the garden at Zorro Ranch and its creepy design right here. The garden at Zorro Ranch featured 3 concentric circles with crosshair-like intersections. So, what are some theories about this? Well, some say it's a symbolic design tied to occult or elite messaging. Others believe it could have psychological or ritualistic significance. It could just be that the guy was like, hey, here's a cool design as well. Would you like me to make it? But one of the reason for suspicion is that Epstein rarely did anything without purpose. Why such a strange, deliberate design in an otherwise private estate? And that does make a lot of sense. He had all those cameras hidden and you had no idea where the cameras were. Obviously, sparing no expense on the design and the creation of this house. You could see where cameras could easily be hidden. They were all through the house. So everywhere he was going was being recorded, and probably recorded for a very, very long time, which would make sense on why the server room was so large and huge. If he was doing this since the 90s, imagine the hardware back then was a lot bulkier, larger, heavier, and required a lot more technology, a lot more room. Probably needed to be air conditioned, especially in New Mexico's summer heat. They really needed to keep moisture and heat away from the surveillance, the massive surveillance that Jeffrey Epstein had going on, the conversations that happened, the things that he caught. This was just a honeypot for him catching whoever he needed to catch. And he could fly in, nobody would know. He'd fly out, and he would have all the information, everything that happened there. Any room you thought was private, any area, any conversation you thought you were having that was private was not private. It was being recorded by him. So, you know, what happened to Zorro's Ranch? Where is it now? Where's this ranch? And well, the ranch, you can see the ranch. Look, it's right on the hills. There's nobody in sight. There's nobody around. Deep ravines, and Jeffrey wasn't letting them go in and inspect the area, which even makes it even more creepy. We're just looking at the area. What is that? Is that your chests outside? It'd be hard for me to own this mansion knowing what has happened in this house. And this house was very possibly created for this purpose. Created for Jeffrey Epstein to prey on young girls, and also either find birds of a feather like him, or get people into incriminating situations that you know, you didn't know she was, in being able to blackmail people. And who knows, you know, I'm sure both of those scenarios could very well have possibly happened, as well as are there some situations that went wrong, and there's very possibly some bones out here for some people that didn't play nice with Jeffrey, didn't do the way. There we go. There's the airstrip right there where they come and fly in. How many people have been trafficked in? They could go hide the plane in this in this hangar, so it wouldn't even show up on satellite. One thing that was said about Jeffrey Epstein was he was very intentional. If you see the car from right there, you can see Looks like there's a truck. Probably not much else going down there. That road might not even be traveled that often. Here's the horse stables. So what happened to Zorro Ranch, right? Well, I could tell you that after Epstein's death, somebody decided that it would be a great idea to sell it for $27.5 million. Well, the ranch sold in 2023 for an undisclosed price. Couldn't you just find out through tax records? But suspicion, who bought it and what's happening there now? The suspicion is, everybody wants to know, is who decided that this would be a great idea to buy Zorro Ranch? And what's happening there now? As the Epstein files have yet to be released by our government, why did Epstein pick an ultra-remote ranch in New Mexico? Zorro Ranch. Who flew in and out of his private airstrip? What happened inside his high surveillance compound, which I believe has been high surveillance since the 90s. And the reason why I believe that is true is because if that room was huge, I mean, they could have just remodeled it. I mean, these guys got money; they don't have to repurpose it. But if that room was huge, they had already run the wires everywhere. He might have been doing this a long time, and back then they needed big, bulky tapes to record hours and hours and hours of reels. And towards the end, he went digital, I'm sure. And I mean, again, to have that type of massive surveillance recording, audio, video, probably not that UFO grainy video, that I gotcha video, just high surveillance on his compound. Was the ranch used for blackmail? I think so. Genetic experiments, psychos, sick fantasy to be the Genghis Khan of pedophiles, or something worse, which it seems like something worse was not uncommon here. We really would like to see if there's some bones out there for somebody that didn't play well, didn't decide to follow what Jeffrey Epstein wanted to a T, or became a liability for him, and he wanted to cut off loose ends.